"Are you really that afraid of the basement?" my boyfriend asked, almost casually, putting on his button-up shirt. I glared back at him. "You're seriously going to bring this up now? I'm getting ready for brunch," I said grumpily, pulling on my bra. He shrugged apologetically. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I just want to know why, especially if it's such a big issue. We can talk about it whenever you want, but I'd really like to talk about it eventually." His tone was calm, filled with sincere concern. I sighed. I felt my annoyance slip. I'd been avoiding the subject for so long. I really didn't want to bring it up, but Timothy had been so great. We'd been living together for over a year now, and he'd been very patient with me and my phobia of dark places. I don't just mean I'm afraid of the dark. I mean I go into full-on panic attack mode and start tearing up the walls with my bare hands and fingernails and teeth if I even get closed into a dark place. It makes going out at night or doing anything normal, like going to the cinema or the planetarium or a bar or a club, very difficult. I have a nightlight in every room in my apartment, and so plenty of backups, plus the flashlights, the candles, the lighter, pound of fresh batteries of all sizes. Of course, my smartphone can also function as a flashlight. I could go on, but suffice to say, I'm surrounded by as much light as possible. This was also why we were meeting Tim's parents for brunch in broad daylight, and not for dinner. Never dinner. I didn't leave the house once it got too close to sunset. I mostly drive wherever I need to go. Taking public transport is too risky, and I don't travel very much or very far. I also can't go into a bathroom that has no natural light and nothing but motion sensor-based lights. If they go out for just a few seconds, my heart races, my blood boils from fear, and my lungs burn with panic. I scream and run, crying usually until I'm back in the light. I'm very lucky to have Tim around. Unlike my previous boyfriends, he never made snide remarks about my phobia, even when it disrupts his schedule. His effortless patience was a stark contrast to my previous relationships. I'd never seen him so much as raise his voice. I slowly sat on the edge of the bed. "Okay, I'll tell you why. Right now, actually, if you'd like. I'd rather just spit it out. We have a few minutes, and it's not a very long story anyway." Timothy quickly pulled on his sock and came to sit next to me. I looked at him and then looked back down at the bed. I've never told this to anybody, but the reason I'm so afraid of the dark, of being alone, is because of what happened to me in the basement when I was 10 years old. I paused, and Tim took my hand. His fingers were rough and warm. I'd never had issues with the dark or the basement or anything like that before. One day my mom asked me to go down and fetch the laundry from the dryer. So I've been down in the basement of this house a billion times, and I think nothing of it at all. The door creaks loudly, just like normal, as I open it. I lazily walk down the steps and was busy messing around with my new Walkman when I suddenly heard the door slam shut behind me. I yelled and was plunged into darkness, so pure I thought I'd gone blind. I groped in the dark for the light switch. I heard it click as the light bulb buzzed to life noisily. As I spoke, I could feel my heart begin to accelerate. I could picture that basement now, that bare light bulb. My hands shook. Tim noticed this and began to caress my hands comfortingly. I continued. The basement wasn't that big or fancy. Nothing but bare concrete. We used it to store some old furniture and photo albums. Of course, we kept our laundry down there, too. I was a bit spooked by the door slamming, so I decided to get the chore over with fast. However, as my bare foot left the last step and touched the cold concrete floor, the light bulb glowed. It glowed so brightly that it burst. I screamed from fright, and I was just plunged into darkness again. It was so quiet that the distant sound of my parents or brother now extinguished. All I could hear was my own breathing. I paused again to catch my breath. It's been a long time since I told this story. All the memories that came with it filled me with terror. I moved in the direction of the laundry. I waved my hands in front of my face, but I couldn't see anything. I knew that there was a flashlight in the drawer of the desk next to the dryer. I took a few tentative steps, expecting any minute that I would feel bright pain as it exploded through my hip as I bumped into the desk. I never did, so I started taking bigger steps. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I realized that something was horribly wrong. I should have been on the other side of the room by now. A few steps after that, I should have been on the other side of the wall. Before I knew it, I was running. No, I was sprinting. I was hoping to be lucky enough to slam hard into the wall. It would prove my nightmare was a fake, but the wall never came. I ran through cold darkness. Then I heard a voice. Soft whisper. It was the voice of a man. There's nothing abnormal about his voice at all, but it gave me goosebumps. He warned me. He warned me never to return to the dark. He warned me to never tell anyone. My lips trembled, but I continued, my voice shaky. By then, I was beyond fear and incredulity. How could this be possible? Where was I? I yelped and shielded my eyes because it was suddenly blindingly bright, and I felt really cramped, like the room had just shrunk. Then strong hands were grabbing me and lifting me. I found myself being pulled from the wall. Tim's eyebrows shot up into his hairline at this point, but he remained quiet. We still have no idea how, but some men had heard a noise, and once they'd seen me, they rescued me immediately. They found me in a well that was hundreds of miles from my house, from that damn basement. I paused again, rubbing my temples with the tips of my fingers. I had to go to therapy, and no one could ever explain anything. Like I said before, I never mentioned what really happened to anyone. I didn't know whether I was more afraid of people thinking I was crazy, or if I was really more afraid of that voice. All I said was that I blacked out on my way downstairs. The therapist said I may have gone into a fugue state or something, which basically means that they don't have a goddamn clue what the hell happened to me. I continued to go to therapy for years and years, but it never helped. I felt I could never tell anyone the truth. Anyway, it all ended up in the papers, and my family and I had to move to a whole new town. After that, it was just kind of swept under the rug. People stopped asking questions. My parents never bring it up. They pretend it didn't happen. I like to do that too. So now that I've told you, I don't want to hear another word about it. If you tease me or prank me, so help me God, I'll dump your ass. I was trying to make a joke to help break the tension, but I could feel myself shaking more and more as I recounted the story. It had been some time since I'd thought about that traumatizing day. I felt tears from the corners of my eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Tim sat silently, his expression one of sympathy and concern. Wow, I had no idea. That sounds really horrifying. I completely understand your fear now. I'm feeling a bit less fond of the dark myself. He kissed me lightly on the forehead and rubbed my arm. I looked at him in disbelief. You don't think I'm crazy? You believe me? He smiled warmly. Of course I do. I can totally believe this universe is full of strange, unexplainable, sometimes horrifying things. He paused and looked me in the eye. But are you still okay for brunch with my folks? We can always reschedule, get McDonald's, watch some DuckTales or something. I smiled at him and chuckled. It's tempting, but no, we've booked a table and everything. Besides, it's too short notice now to cancel. Let's get going, okay? I I feel okay. It was a long time ago." Tim glanced at me in a way that showed he was wholly unconvinced, but he yielded. "All right, my dear. I'll just take the trash down quickly. Meet you downstairs." A few minutes later, I had my makeup on and was waiting downstairs on the ground floor. Tim had left ahead of me to take the trash to the refuse bin in the basement, and I'd expected him to be waiting for me already. But he wasn't there. I frowned, confused. Was he still downstairs? Why was he taking so long? I tried to keep my panic in check, but as the minutes ticked by, my heart began to thump loudly. No. There's no such thing as the dark place. There's no such thing as the monster in the basement. I stammered to myself softly as I tried to force the panic back down into the recesses of my stomach. He's I couldn't end that thought. What if by telling him the truth I put him in danger? The voice had said not to tell anyone. I thought that he would only be angry at me, but now I'm starting to think otherwise. My blood was electrified with terror as I took a small step towards the stairs. The stairway was curved so that the door was hidden. I cranked my neck and peered around the corner. The large metal basement door was shut. Tim, is everything okay?" My voice shook slightly as I spoke, but it was firm and loud. Silence pressed against my ears. I pulled my phone out of my bag. With the tap of a button, a small but bright flashlight switched on and illuminated the hallway. I turned the flashlight towards the stairs. With shaking hands, I took a step forward, started to descend. I halted after 3 steps. I felt dizzy now. Tim, this isn't funny. I'm really freaking..." Then I heard him. Kara, I tripped and hit my head." I heard him groan in pain. "I think I twisted my ankle. I really need some help." My fear instantly dissipated. Tim was hurt badly. His voice sounded really worried. If he'd been unconscious this whole time, he'd need serious medical attention. Shit, why had I waited so long to go check on him? Of course, there was no such thing as monsters. I hurried down the basement stairs and grabbed the door handle as I pulled it open. Complete, utter darkness pressed up against my eyes. I felt an unnatural coldness in the air. The basement door swung back and slammed into me so hard I felt myself fly through the air. I hit the ground hard and yelled with pain and surprise. The impact knocked my phone out of my hand, and I heard it smash off as the light went out. "What the hell?" I stammered, my head swimming with confusion. Timothy, I whispered into the pure darkness. I was sitting on the hard, damp floor, which was the only other thing I could sense, besides the horrendous cold, my soft sobs and the musty smell. Then a gloomy light bloomed to life. My jaw dropped open in horror. It couldn't be possible. There, many yards in front of me, too far to be possible, a single bare light bulb was hanging. Its light was cold and small. It looked almost exactly like the light in my old basement. As I looked down, I yelled and began to wail loudly. Lying in the pool of light beneath the bulb was the mutilated, bloodied corpse of my dear sweet Timothy, the man who I had loved more than anything, the man I'd wanted to marry, the man who always made me feel safe, the man who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and pancakes. His gray eyes were empty as he stared at me. Gone was the perennial warmth and love. His body was covered in deep scratches, and blood soaked his clothes. Oh my God, he was dead. He was dead. Guilt, terror, pain, all kinds of things washed over me. Tears poured down my face, and I yelled incomprehensibly, pleading for someone to help. Without warning, another identical light bulb appeared before the first. My whimpering paused. Then again, And again, my eyes widened with terror. Soon hundreds of lights were blooming into existence, like frigid miniature stars. The line of lights made a beeline towards me, with the final bulb flickering to life above my head. I heard the sizzle and hum of its electromagnetic field. I was frozen with terror. I had no idea what to do. My eyes burned with tears, and I squinted. Suddenly there was a loud pop. A bulb had exploded, and I shouted with fright. I gazed down the line of lights and gasped. At first all I saw were the shards of broken glass and the remnants of the broken bulb above. It had been the bulb right at the far end. My gaze shifted. A humanoid silhouette stood beneath the broken bulb. My heart stopped dead. No. I moaned softly, my brain unable to process the terror. Then the next bulb in the line burst, and the man instantaneously stood beneath it, one light closer to me. I screamed with fear and found myself clambering to my feet. I had to get out of here. As I struggled to stand in my panic, I heard another loud pop as the next bulb blew. Then the next one exploded. Suddenly all the bulbs were exploding, one after the other, louder and louder. I saw the silhouette get closer and closer, as swift as a shadow. "No, you stay the hell away from me," I screamed as bile forced its way into my mouth. My heart screamed from panic. As I turned, I heard a soft, raspy voice say, "We warned you." Tears flooding down my face, I groped wildly for the basement door. I could feel someone standing right behind me. I yelled in delighted surprise as my hands grasped the door handle. I heaved the door open and ran screaming up the stairs. As I got out of the building, I continued to run and scream as I welcomed the feel of warm, sticky summer air on my skin. I'd never been so happy to see the calm blue sky and the vicious midday sun. I ended up being taken to a hospital by a bunch of cops who'd seen me yelling and crying as I ran down the street. My face, my clothes were covered in dirt. My knees and elbows were scratched, but otherwise I was unharmed. I didn't dare tell them the truth. Instead, I said I'd had a panic attack, triggered by going down into the basement to find Timothy. The police searched the whole building, but the only thing they found in the basement that proved Timothy had been there at all was the trash bag he'd taken down. This time, the police have no leads. I miss Tim so much. I feel a numbness where he should be. I keep expecting him to just be around the next corner. His parents refuse to answer my calls. On the other hand, my parents won't stop calling. Suffice to say, I can't even think about the dark without bursting into tears. Even if there's no hope for psychological recovery, I don't think it matters. I still feel like someone's standing behind me constantly. The feeling is especially strong when my back faces a lightless room. I'm never alone now. They're always watching me, waiting for me to return to the dark. I've kept all the lights on constantly. I've not left my apartment in days. No matter how long I wait, though, I can feel them. I'm not even surprised. After all, I had not heeded the darkness's warnings. I get the feeling those who trespass are never forgotten, and certainly never forgiven. One of the first things my EMS cert teacher told me was that the touchiness would pass. That one day I'd be slipping IV needles into arms as easily as I floss between my teeth. Yet, I was 2 weeks into my first full-time ambulance gig, and I was still shaking between calls. The 3-story inferno raging downtown didn't help, but that's not where me and my partner Tom were heading. Prior to this whole situation, our night was quiet. mostly dealing with confused dementia patients or burgeoning schizophrenics. The MO is either to find their medicine or transport them to the hospital. Most of our calls were like that, low stakes, right in my comfort zone. But now we were dispatched to a Priority 2 emergency, the kind of call that necessitates the whole lights and siren deal. Someone called in a possible self-harm situation involving one of their neighbors. Serious stuff, but I had Tom with me. He was a vet, a former cop, and I was always in his steady hands. The issue was that the downtown inferno had really messed traffic up for 2 solid miles in front and behind us. We hadn't moved more than 10 yards in about 5 minutes, and even though it was protocol to have a police response as well, we were as close to the front as it got. Hell, we were the front line at that point. Another minute passed in gridlock before Tom finally blurted out, "You gotta go alone." And there was really no other way. Abandoning the ambulance and blocking further fire trucks wasn't an option. Solo responses were rare, sure, but it was necessary in desperate circumstances like this. I knew it was coming, but it was the last thing I wanted to hear. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to go. Deep in my heart, I would be willing to lay my life down for a patient. I wanted so badly to be that type of cool, methodical mind that entered an emergency situation and eased their patient back from the brink. It just hadn't come to me yet. Tom saw it. I'm sure if seconds weren't the difference between life and death, he would have given me 5 minutes for a pep talk. For now, though, all he could do was pat my shoulder and smirk. "Knock 'em alive, kid." So out I went, squeezing myself between the bumper-to-bumper traffic until I found myself on the correct cross street. There's something horrifying in the minutes between their call and your arrival. The feeling creeps in while you're slipping over broken sidewalks and homeless tents, realizing you're the beginning and the end of their recovery. It all comes down to you, the practitioner. To be blunt, you're God for those few minutes, and God was having a pretty bad time gaining entry. Someone buzzed me in, but of course, apartment 13B was locked. Our response time was already woefully long, so waiting for police to break it down was not an option. I went to town using my bump key, prying it open less with finesse and more with raw, frantic energy. The door opened to near complete darkness. I saw candles around the corner and the end of the hall, but a whole lot of unknown was between me and there. Light switches were oddly dead, so my flashlight had to guide my feet. From the little I could see, it was a well-lived-in apartment. At least 2 generations had sunk their essence into the carpet. That's when the smell hit. It was familiar, the scent of a man. No, not exactly, no. It was like my granddad's musk. I hadn't smelled it since I was in his lap as a kid, but the recall was instantaneous. It made me feel oddly safe, which lasted only a few seconds, considering what I would soon see. Around the corner, there was a metric ton of candles in the living room. Every surface was covered with them. Weirdly, the wax was melting from every kind of receptacle except a candle jar. Bowls, mugs, shot glasses. The source of the musk, no doubt. They cast the entire room in a homemade devilish glow. They lit the way to the girl I would come to know as Ellie. She had wrapped herself up in the corner, laying motionless. Baggy sweats and a white tee hid her frailty at a glance. I rushed to her, set her on her back, and began to triage. First was the bruising on her neck. It was fresh, must have tried some sort of strangulation, but it wasn't what did her in, so I quickly moved on. Blood caked her white t-shirt. I followed it to her wrists. They were messy slashes, but they didn't look deep enough to do real harm. That's when I noticed the culprit of my light switch woes. Sloppily wound duct tape attached a fork to her hand, just a foot away from the charred out power outlet. Christ. She'd electrocuted herself. Full cardiac arrest. She could have died in the seconds it took me to triage. My hand found position and began compressions. I regained some confidence as I found my rhythm, laying the foundation of the AED to work its magic. The repetitiveness gave me my first moment to take Ellie in. She was young, maybe even younger than my 19-year-old sister. Her being in this position seemed so wrong. I could see this face getting drunk at a college party, waiting tables at a diner in town, but not here. I thought about the second chance I wanted to give her as I continued compressions. That's when the room started to feel warm. The candle scent now got a bit clearer. It wasn't the manly musk of someone's grandfather. It was an animalistic scent. Dried blood and mange. Something that activated a long-buried fight-or-flight instinct in my primitive genes. I had to keep on with my compressions, though. Even if I had lost track of time, I might have been way short of 2 minutes when I decided to stop CPR and pick up the AED. It wasn't until I'd unzipped the bag that I realized this was the first time I'd used the AED in the field. I'd learned the ins and outs, tested it on course dummies, and seen others use it, but I'd never actually been tasked to use it in the field. I pulled up her shirt and applied the wire pads, again feeling a warmth that sent a bead of sweat down my neck. Finally, me, the naive idiot, decided to turn it on. The flames of the candle array now burned twice as bright. They licked high enough to start to uncover some of the shadows against the wall, revealing scraggy-looking wallpaper. No time to admire the settings, though. I waited patiently as the AED robotically counted down and administered the first shock. It picked up heartbeat rhythm automatically, but I still used my fingers to feel her absent pulse directly. It remained still. No response. Desperate, I repositioned my fingers as I checked for a pulse, and I didn't find one. Of that I was supremely confident. My fingers wiped some of the blood from her wrist as I did. Only now did I decide her cuts weren't at all random. They, in fact, cut out symbols in her flesh. A star. No, that was a pentagram. But the affirmative boop of the AED took my mind off the task. It rejiggered her heartbeat, automatically suspending its shocks. Any weirdness I felt came secondary to my resumed chest compressions. Resuscitation, especially with a faint heartbeat like this, always felt to me like pulling someone from quicksand. You're shoulder deep, clinging to a couple of fingers, hanging onto that little grip as you try to extract the entire person. If you're good, that little grip's all you need. I pumped with that metaphor in my mind's eye, laser focused on my goal. For 15 seconds, I felt like the ideal practitioner I dreamed of being, reeling my patient back from the brink. Until, I shit you not, the flames gained a life of their own. At first I thought it was just the ones directly in front of me, but as I spun I realized it animated every live flame, each one dancing its way towards the ceiling, causing the receptacles to bubble over with wax. You spend a lifetime watching flames move randomly, flicking with the wind, and I promise you their sudden conscious movement will rattle you to your depths. A full red light illuminated what I now realized wasn't wallpaper. It was blood-inked writing, overlapping scrawls of mantras over every wall and even possibly the ceiling. I imagined her crawling like a spider as she wrote, "Praise be all glory to the true one, may his new kingdom reign." Then finally the one spanning the entire main room. "May my blood serve as sacrifice." I suddenly felt like an interloper in a place I should not be, intruding on an ancient ritual. Whatever had its grip on her seemed to be in the room with me now. The flames kept up their height so I could take it all in, wax spilling over onto the floor. Looking back now, I think it was offering me a chance to reconsider what I was doing. It had its claim on her, but as her practitioner, I felt I had an equal claim. I resumed compressions, faster now, desperate to get her back as fast as possible. The flames swirled, seeming enraged by this development, and not letting me forget it. Yet somehow I was able to separate my technique from my panic-ridden nerves, keeping a tight rhythm for almost a minute before the girl finally snapped upright. The flames dissipated in an instant, down to tiny weak flickers. Her eyes were shut at first, like she was still within a blissful dream. Then her eyes opened, what she seemed to clearly think was a nightmare. Where'd he go? Where is he? She seemed taken by complete surprise, grounding herself back in reality as she pawed at herself. My practiced lines of patient comfort only enraged her. You have to let me get back. With rabid panic, she started to grab at her wrists, but soon realized it wasn't the most economic method of return. I finally regained my composure just as I saw her eyes meet the burned outlet. I screamed and grabbed at her leg, but her hand stretched to reach it. It connected, but unfortunately, it seemed she'd blown that out completely the last time. No shock was administered. Ellie kicked me off and stood, searching for a weapon, for a way out. It gave me a second to reason with her, person to person. That practiced BS now scared right out of me, but she responded with a level-headed reason that made it feel almost like she was speaking in my best interest. You don't understand. I'm the last one. He needs me. She raced across the room to the dresser, rifling through the top drawer. I went to pull her off when she struck me hard across the face. It wasn't a punch to harm as much as a utility swipe, keeping me away as economically as possible. I was a few feet away when she pulled the knife from the drawer. There wasn't any fanfare, no waiting to see the horrified look on my face. She just sliced it as fast as she possibly could. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 good hacks before Tom rushed in to tackle her. In one swoop, he was able to pin her while cleanly plucking the blade from her grip. Blood pooled as he steadied her flailing arms with ease, getting the one she had sliced into the open. You okay? Once we had established that I was at least physically unharmed, I got back to work wrapping her wrist, stopping the brunt of the blood flow. Tom reinstated order to my rapidly deteriorating nightmare. As much as she wailed and cried in that first minute, she settled completely as she was padded up and restrained for transport. Her dead eyes followed me back and forth across the room as I spoke to the police officers that had arrived, burned into my scalp even when I turned around. She seemed to have come to a realization, something that set her at complete peace even here in the reality she had been forced back into. Stupid me, I reasoned that maybe I'd given her a new lease on life, something she would cherish. Stupid. That was a week ago. There were 5 total ritual suicides that night, aside from Ellie. All were successful. The first was a young artist who burned herself on a pyre, setting her warehouse studio aflame. That was the inferno that caught Tom and I in the traffic heap. My first patient died 2 days later. He was a 12-year-old boy suffering from asphyxia after eating some mislabeled Chinese food. An EpiPen was administered by his mom, but it wasn't enough. We arrived in time and got the epinephrine IV in. However, his heart responded in a bizarre fashion. It began to rapidly slow with the increasing dose. He wasn't just dying, it was like I was killing him. He died so fast it took his mom 2 minutes to realize. The longest 2 minutes of my life. 1 is a fluke, but 6 are a pattern. 5 more of my patients would die, some with completely non-life-threatening conditions. My supervisor comforted me after the first, but things darkened quickly from there. Despite the fact that I was investigated and could not have done anything different, I was suspended indefinitely. It took me almost a week to find Ellie. From the hospital, they bounced her between a few psych wards until landing her at one for, shall we say, more intense cases. Despite this, their windows were not barred, just thick and secured tight with latches. Something told me hers would be unlocked. It was. She's sleeping. Been this way for the last hour. I've gripped and released the knife in my pocket 100 times over, though. After high school, having no better ideas, I joined the Navy SEALs. I never really liked any of it, but it was a job, after all. I love the guns, the airplanes, the grenades, but having to run all the time while some scumbag with a chip on his shoulder yells in your face isn't my idea of fun. Things got a lot more interesting after my term of service ended. I still had a high security clearance, so I used it to take temporary jobs as a mercenary, hired gun. I did some stints in Iraq with Blackwater, where they sent me out in the middle of the desert. A watchtower, an oil refinery looming over the burning sands. Along with a few other guys, they told us, guard the area with your life. While better than the SEALs, working for Blackwater was extremely boring. The other mercenaries and I would mostly just chain smoke cigarettes and drink coffee all night, staring out across the dead, empty desert. Over time, I worked my way up. Things started to get more interesting when a job offer arrived in my email one afternoon. This is what it said. Mr. Chase, I am the head of security for a private group of entrepreneurs and investors. Through some mutual contacts, I've heard of your professionalism and experience. We're currently putting together a small crew of guards for a private event on Redacted Island out in the Pacific Ocean that will run from January 9th to January 27th. Would you be interested in this job? The pay rate is $900 a day. Once you're on the island, it will be impossible to leave until the period of employment has ended. If you're interested, please respond to this email as soon as possible. Sincerely, Mario Antonin, head of security. I'd worked jobs like this from time to time, but none of them were paying that well. At most, I would usually get $350 to $500 a day, which was still good money when I was working 7 days a week, till the job finished. I instantly responded and said yes, I was interested. In response, they sent me a non-disclosure agreement that was the size of a small novel. That was how I found myself on a private jet, flying out to an island in the middle of the vast blue sea. I was never told the coordinates of the island, or saw it on a map. It was all kept very secret. A few hours later, we landed on a private airstrip. I looked out the window of the jet, seeing the tropical waters of the Pacific Ocean stretching off to the horizon in every direction. Below me stood an island with palm trees and sandy white beaches. An enormous Victorian mansion loomed directly in the center of it all. The mansion was painted black and looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It had no windows, and the turrets spiraled up into blade-like points. That was my first inkling that something might not be quite right about this trip. As the stairs to the private jet descended, I looked out on this strange new world. Employees waited to greet us, looking like beaten dogs. Some had their heads down, their eyes blankly scanning the ground. Most of them were women wearing red dresses, reminding me of stewardesses on the plane. The jet strip was surrounded by palm trees and tropical brush. The chirping of insects sounded all around us, high and resonant. I saw a strange patch engraved on all the employees' uniforms. It looked like a stick figure drawing of a man, the bottom of his body ending in a C. Its arms were long and jointed, almost spidery. 3 symbols, like repeating iron crosses, connected the left side of the body and the line. I wondered if it was the logo of some company. I put it out of my mind for now, but I'd see that symbol again all over the island, painted on the side of the mansion, and even cut into the trees with a knife. It would only be later that night that I realized its connection to Moloch. "Good day, sir, and welcome to the island," the server on my left said, with glassy eyes and a fake smile. They all looked up at once, but it was like the workers all looked through me rather than at me. Their eyes looked flat and dead, like painted-on doll's eyes. "The island, huh? They wouldn't tell us where we were going. They said it was a secret. Is that what you call it?" The woman just nodded, the doll-like smile never leaving her face. "Officially, this island is unnamed and uninhabited," the woman said. "In fact, all traces of it have been scrubbed from the internet. You won't find it on Google Maps or any other publicly available satellite imagery." She leaned forward towards me with heavily mascaraed eyes and ruby red lipstick splashed across her lips. "This is a very special place. Only very special people are allowed here. We should be honored to work here under our Savior." "I hope you're talking about Jesus or something," I said jokingly. She just smiled blankly and motioned me forward. "Just follow the trail for a few hundred feet," she said, pointing at an opening in the palm trees where logs were laid down horizontally over the muggy jungle, "and you'll find the mansion. Good luck." I thought it was somewhat of a strange thing to say, wishing a random stranger luck. By the end of the night, I realized that simply to make it off the island alive, I might need that luck. I followed the woman's directions to the back of a brutalist mansion. A heavy metal door stood there with a small bulletproof window atop it. A tanned Spanish face glowered out at me, then rapidly drew back and disappeared. A few heartbeats later, the door slid to the side on a gliding of hidden gears. The head of security at the island was a heavily tattooed ex-Marine named Mario. He wore a dark Kevlar vest over his black outfit, making him look like a walking shadow. I found the security had their own private complex in the mansion, as he showed me around the site. Hundreds of hidden cameras covered every angle of the mansion, and the surrounding parts of the island, too. Dozens of black-clad security agents swarmed over the screens, checking monitors and computers constantly. "Quite a setup you've got here," I said to Mario, nodding at him. He smacked me on the shoulder, giving me a confident grin. "Money's no issue here, Richard. Security is paramount. There are things on this island that could rip apart the world, if ever they escaped." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Nuclear weapons or something?" I asked, with a laugh. "You'll see for yourself later," he said, his dark eyes flashing with something cold and alien. Mario led me in a couple of the new hired guns around the island. The place was certainly strange. It reminded me of some combination of secret black ops site and a playboy billionaire's private heaven. All the doors in the mansion looked like they were made of thick steel. They had wheels that would spin, like those on a submarine. The mansion also had no windows at all, at least none that I could see, except for the small shatterproof glass openings on the steel doors. I didn't want to ask too many questions, however. Couldn't resist asking him a couple of small things, though. At least, they seemed small to me. "What are those hatchways?" I asked Mario, pointing to the rectangular covers built into the concrete walkways. They had heavy handles. Are those manholes or something? "They're tunnels under the island, just for maintenance and security, you understand." "Wow, this place is certainly well developed," I said. We came out through a grove of palm trees. A stone walkway led down a white beach. Dozens of yachts were moored all across the shore, some of them looking like they must have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. "There's a lot of money and power here. That's why it's important you never talk about what you see here. There are people who control the world, the ones beyond the government and the media, not the elected officials who people see, but the actual power." "Like who? You mean the Rothschilds or the Suarezes?" I laughed again, a sarcastic grinding laugh that grated my nerves. "Trust me, the truly powerful ones don't even have public personas. If you know their names, then they're just one of the puppets." I just shook my head at that, and then asked the real question that had been bothering me since I arrived. "Who's the Savior?" I asked. "Is that some code name or something?" Mario froze in place. "He's the one who runs everything here," he whispered conspiratorially, looking around nervously. "But don't be mentioning that kind of shit here. You'll probably see him tonight anyway. He's the one who runs the show. He'll be on the stage in his normal outfit." By the end of the day, I was suited up like the rest of the security staff, wearing the pure black pants and shirt with the symbol of Moloch engraved over the heart. Hundreds of the world's most famous politicians, actors, businessmen, artists had gathered, streaming in the front gate with a lot of soft, quiet chatter. I stood by the open doorway of a side exit with my AR-15 and body armor next to one of the other soldiers. They had also given me a sidearm. Every entrance or exit was manned by at least 2 armed men. The security at this place was some of the most intense I'd ever seen. Beyond the door, there were rows after rows of the most comfortable seats, all gathered in a semicircle around a massive stage made of pure mahogany. Blood-red curtains stood closed in front of the room, concealing their secret, for now at least. I heard the elites inside calling out their praise for Satan. I didn't want to look at the rows of high-ranking politicians, celebrities, influencers, and what have you, but my curiosity was high. I peeked around the corner of the stone archway, seeing the red curtains on the stage drawing apart. Saw one of my favorite actors standing in the front row, clapping excitedly and jumping up and down. The crowd cheered as a naked female strapped to an obsidian altar lay there. She was beautiful, blonde, probably no older than 20, with the face of a supermodel. Her mouth was gagged, her arms outstretched like Jesus on the cross. Thin leather cords were tied around her wrists and ankles, biting deeply into the skin. Her eyes rolled wildly as she shook her head from side to side. She froze as her eyes met mine for a brief moment. I saw the pleading expression there, the mortal terror, the absolute horror. A man in a goat mask wearing black robes slunk out from the side of the stage, carrying a wavy silver dagger engraved with strange symbols. The crowd erupted into a primal roar of pleasure and excitement that sounded like it came from a monstrous mouth. "Worthy is the Lamb," the man in the goat mask screamed with electric amplification. He had a deep voice, as if he had rocks rolling around in his throat. The crowd roared and clapped. Scattered cries of "Hail Lucifer" and "Ah, Satan" echoed from the massive auditorium. "Hey, pay attention," the other security agent said at my side with a thick Finnish accent. He was a tall Scandinavian guy named Colmek. "You're not getting paid to watch the show, new guy." I tried to rip my gaze away from the stage, but it held my attention with the obsessive horror. "The burnt bones of children and women have been offered to the Ancient Ones, to Moloch," the man on the stage said. "Under our feet, the burnt bodies of hundreds lay dreaming. This victim will be the 666th. Her body will bring about the Genesis we seek, the direct experience of the divine held by the gods, by Lucifer and Moloch and Baal." The roaring of the crowd temporarily drowned out the electrified magnification of his voice. "Tonight, we will rip open the veil." I had stopped watching the show, instead staring blankly out at the beach and the palm trees. At that moment, another black-clad security agent came up to my partner, whispering something in his ear, then immediately disappeared, heading off back in the direction of the main security office. Kolomek shook his head grimly. "I'll be right back," he said. "Stay right here. Don't move from this door no matter what. And pay attention." I nodded and watched as he walked off in the same direction. I immediately took the opportunity to continue watching the ceremony. I'd missed something important, apparently. The woman now lay dead on the sacrificial table, a gaping hole in her chest. Blood spurted from the crater as the man in the goat mask held her beating heart grasped tightly in his hands, letting the blood stream down his naked fingers. The crowd cheered with a rising bloodlust and insanity. Most of them were standing, their eyes gleaming and wide with fanatical adoration. The entire spectacle reminded me of some kind of ancient Aztec ritual. As the woman's sightless eyes stared vacantly up in death, the man in the goat mask pulled out a can of gasoline. The clear liquid gurgled as he upended the canister over her pale, bloodless face, over her naked stomach and long legs. A moment later, he lit a match and dropped it. I heard the whooshing of the flames as they rose up. The crowd went deathly silent as they watched the rippling flames. The man in the goat mask began chanting in some strange language I had never heard before. Sounded Semitic, but I knew it wasn't Arabic or Hebrew. I felt something like electricity ripple through the air, almost like a feeling of falling pressure before a storm. I looked down at the hairs on my arms, seeing them rise up. I looked back up at the stage, and my eyes widened in horror. The flaming body of the sacrificial victim had started to morph before my eyes and the eyes of the crowd around me. The dripping, blackening flesh jumped up and down, as if there were rats trapped in her body trying to escape. There was a deafening hissing, as if 1,000 snakes were being burned alive. The dead woman's arms jerked up, the skin splitting open as if she had seams running along her skin. Something dark and muscular with curving black talons ripped its way out of the dead, burning flesh. Behind it, a head appeared with long, curving horns and eyes that spun with whirls of fire. It looked like the offspring of a bull and a demon. Its imposing body rose from the inferno, appearing like magic from the solid stone. It raised itself to its full height, looming over the crowd, the last of the woman's blood hissing and boiling away as her flesh dissolved into ashes. "Behold, Moloch rises!" the man in the goat mask screamed in fanatical joy. The crowd's cheering had stopped, though. Many of the faces in the crowd looked chalk white with terror. A bull god surveyed the crowd, its horns nearly scraping the ceiling 20 feet above the stage. At that moment, I knew death was on its way, with eyes of fire and a grin like a skull, ready to reap the field of human bodies. I heard running behind me, but I didn't dare turn away from the horrific sight. The last of the fire's embers died, sending up thin wisps of gray smoke that spiraled around the bull god's monstrous face. Moloch stood as still as a statue. If it weren't for one thing, I might have thought it was some sort of sculpture or an art project. He had 2 nostrils like a serpent's. As his great lungs inhaled, the smoke billowed in and out of his mouth and nose. Some of the people at the edge of the crowd had gotten up, hurrying towards the door. Moloch's head ratcheted to face them, his fiery eyes narrowing into slits. "Do not leave," the man in the goat mask pleaded. "Those who have fear are not worthy of life. Do not prove yourselves unworthy of life." As the first of the fleeing men and women got to within a few steps of the door, Moloch gave a primal roar. In a blur of strength, he reached down and ripped the blackened sacrificial altar off the stage. It ripped from the wood with a tremendous crack, like a bullwhip. He hurled the heavy mass of stone at those heading towards the opposite exit, the one I was guarding. I watched it curve through the air. The people started screaming and clawing to escape as it smashed down on their heads with a grating crash. I could feel the floor shake from where I stood outside. Blood exploded from their smashed bodies. I saw arms and legs jerking and seizing under the heavy stone, but within a few moments they slowed and stopped. Others were running towards the exit, but Moloch leapt off the stage in a blur. In a few bounding steps, he reached the pale, terrified faces on the outside of the threshold. His massive clawed hands came down. I heard bones shatter as blood sprayed my face on the wall. Bone splinters and pieces of brain exploded from the screaming bodies. I backpedaled, wiping my eyes, trying to get the blood off so I could see. No one had told me what to do in this situation. I didn't know if I was supposed to shoot that massive thing or if this was all just part of the show. "Richard," a familiar voice cried from behind me. Panic oozed from every word. I spun, seeing Mario and Colomek standing side by side, their pupils dilated and their expressions grim. "We have a major problem." "I know," I said, holding my rifle tightly. I pointed behind me at the scene of rampant death and destruction. I'd seen bloodshed and war before, but this was different. The island itself seemed to feel it. The wind, which had been calm when I first arrived, now whipped the island in a fast circular motion. The breezes smelled of burnt matches and coppery blood. The static electricity, which had caused the hairs on my arm to rise, rippled over everything, with tiny blue flashes, increased in power by the second. "No, not Moloch," Kalak said, looking calmer than I felt. "The Savior lets Moloch thin the herd every year. It's Leviathan, the beast from the water. It smells the blood and is drawn from the depths of the ocean. We picked up the first blips on the radar a few minutes ago. When it gets here, it won't stop until everything is rubble. It'll kill everyone on the island. All security personnel must report to the South Beach immediately," a cool robotic voice cried out over hidden loudspeakers all over the island. The screaming from the auditorium had quieted behind me. I was afraid to look inside. "There it is," Kalmak said, his head jerking up as the emergency alert sounded. "It's time to fight," he said, motioning me to follow. We sprinted over curving trails of smooth logs between deadly quiet forests. All the insects and birds had gone silent. Ahead of us, the palm trees opened up onto the Pacific Ocean, but it was no longer a beautiful tropic blue. A black, swirling whirlpool, like an ulcerous wound, had opened up on its surface. It stretched hundreds of feet across, drawing closer to the shore by the second. Dead fish, sharks, dolphins, squids, even whales spun in the filthy dark water. 20 black-clad security agents waited for the three of us on the beach, their eyes wide, their faces pale with terror. Like myself, they all had AR-15s and Glocks with extra magazines for both. I guess the Glocks might be useful for blowing my brains out if it was a last resort, over being eaten by some hell beast, but I didn't think it would stop anything from another dimension. The clouds swirled overhead in a thick curtain as black as smoke. Flashes of blue lightning detonated every couple of seconds. Mario raised his hand, screaming over the roaring of the wind. Colomek stood by my side, his face grim and his eyes narrowed. "Your job is to fight off anything that tries to get on the island," Mario said, looking from one face to another with rapt attention. "Nothing can stand against high-caliber rifle fire. Shoot at the face and eyes when it comes up. We've dealt with creatures like this before, and they will retreat if you injure them badly enough." I had the sense of being fed a line of bullshit as my mind processed this. "What exactly is coming up?" one of the doe-eyed security men asked. He barely looked old enough to drink, a young, muscular hulk with a Marine Corps tattoo on his neck. "It is called Leviathan. Sometimes the ritual here and the smell of blood can draw strange things. Leviathan is one of those. We have encountered it before. Most important thing to remember is..." His voice was suddenly drowned out by the terrible cacophony that came from the center of the whirlpool. A screech like the detonation of a nuclear missile shook the ground. The ocean jumped and bubbled frantically. The beach heaved and creaked, the white sand disappearing in fissures that opened up like greedy mouths underneath my feet. I lost my balance, falling forwards. The screeching continued, rising into a primal roar. A green dragon head, the color of an infected wound, erupted from the surface of the thrashing water, rising up dozens of feet in the air. It had two enormous slitted eyes that dilated and constricted quickly, as if glowering down at us. The screeching abruptly stopped, the pointed mouth of the dragon slamming shut with a sound like a gunshot. Within moments, another cancerous green head shot up in a blur, its skin looking as hard as stone. Ridges that looked as sharp as swords ran the length of its reptilian skull. arcing over its eyes and pointed snout. More heads erupted from the ocean, until all 7 of Leviathan's heads loomed over us. Not one of us fired. Not one of us even seemed to breathe as we surveyed the beast across the no-man's land of white sand. The slitted eyes and yellowed irises of the 7 heads had a demonic hunger, a reptilian coldness. Far behind us, I heard a distant scream still echoing from the auditorium where Moloch held sway. "Fire!" Mario cried. Instantly, a cacophony of gunshots exploded all around me. I jumped to my feet, scrambling up as the 7-headed dragon leapt forward. Thousands of gallons of salt water streamed down its massive body as it came up on the beach. Long black paws with bone-white talons shot out of the surging ocean, followed by a tapering tail like a water snake's. I brought the rifle up and emptied my magazine as fast as I could, pulling the trigger over and over as I aimed at the many slitted eyes of Leviathan. The bullets seemed to ping harmlessly off its hard obsidian scales, though. It scrambled onto the shore, its heads coming down in a blur, rows and rows of vampiric fangs gleaming dully in each of its mouths. One security agent was bit in half, the spurting stump of its lower body still standing for a long moment, even as the rest of the body disappeared down the throat of the dragon. Mario ran forward, slamming another magazine into his rifle and opening fire point blank. One of the heads came down in a blur towards him. Its great staring eyes exploded in a shower of blue blood and thick viscous fluid. The dragon's head pulled back, its mouth opening in a primal scream of agony. As I reloaded, I scanned the area around me, realizing that nearly half the security guys were either dead or critically injured. I backpedaled away, keeping my eyes on the dragon. It continuously drew forward, killing more of its enemies with every step. I turned and ran for the forest, the sounds of shattering bones and dying men ringing through the air with a sickening clarity behind me. Once I'd reached the borders of the trail, I heard Mario yell, "Retreat!" behind me. By that point, it was too late, though. "Hey, wait up," a voice whispered from behind me. I turned my head, seeing Colomac. Spatters of drying blood covered his face and uniform. As far as I could tell, none of it was his. "Mario's dead. They're all dead. We need to get out of here. We need to get off the island." "How?" "Find the Savior," he answered, panting and out of breath. "We must find him. He can get us out of here." "I don't even know what the guy looks like. He was wearing a goat mask." "You'll know him when you see him. His body is covered in scars, everything except his face. Stay close to me. We need to watch each other's back. It's our only chance of survival." A trail of twisted, broken bodies led from the mansion to the surrounding trails of the beaches. A decapitated woman with a solid gold necklace embedded with diamonds lay in front of me. It was strange on the island, the way oblivion and ineffable wealth coexisted side by side. Everything was deathly silent now, even in the mansion's auditorium. "Where's the Savior?" I asked through gritted teeth. I peeked my head into the auditorium, but nothing moved. Hundreds of smashed and bloodied bodies littered the floor. "He's around here somewhere," Colomac answered. He started circling the mansion, looking for signs of life. Colomac took the lead. As he turned a corner, an enormous black hand with sharp claws of fingers flitted towards us in a blur, wrapping itself around his chest. Colomac gave a strangled cry as it closed around him. I heard the bones crush as a spout of blood and gore flew from his mouth and nose, as if it were a toothpaste tube being squeezed. I backpedaled away as Moloch threw the twitching corpse aside like a discarded toy. It smashed into the wall of the mansion, exploding wetly. A human-shaped, bloody stain languidly dripping down the wall above Colomac's mangled body. Moloch slowly turned his head towards me, the fiery eyes flashing with hunger. He gnashed his fangs together, taking a step forward with legs the size and shape of tree trunks. With every step he took, I felt the ground tremble. "Stop!" I cried, moving away from the monstrous creature. Why are you doing this? There is no why, he gurgled, his voice monstrous and inhumanly slow. There is only power. The weak deserve to die. Only the strong are worthy of life. I raised my rifle in a last-ditch effort to save myself. Moloch saw it and started running towards me, every step crushing the paved walkway around the mansion into rubble and dust. I aimed for his eyes and nose, emptying the entire magazine as quickly as I could. The bullets smashed into Moloch's face. Dark red clotted blood dripped out of the wounds, writhing with maggots. Drops of it fell around me, landing on my hair and face. I felt the small larva twist all over my skin. Moloch's blood smelled nauseating, like some combination of stink bugs and rotting bodies. He slowed, giving a roar of pain. I turned to run in the opposite direction, but as I looked out in the direction of the beach, my heart dropped. Leviathan was moving in our direction, the giant dragon head looming over the trees. Quickly, it swept towards me, like a dark wind. You will suffer for that, worthless slave, Moloch growled, wiping blood from his fiery eyes with his sharp talons. A sudden idea came to me. I ran in the direction of Leviathan. Moloch followed closely at my heels, only a few steps behind. Leviathan slithered towards us over the sand and trees, its enormous body undulating like a water snake's. I screamed at it incoherently. Its 7 heads snapped towards me. Its slitted eyes widened as it saw Moloch. I heard the crashing of Moloch's footsteps behind me, only feet away from crushing me into paste. His massive lungs heaved, breath coming quickly, exhaling the odor of sulfur and smoke. Leviathan, Moloch growled in his demonic voice. These are my tributes. Leviathan's dragon head looked straight up at the sun and screamed in response, their many voices rising and falling in a dissonant wail. As I sprinted into the trees, Leviathan and Moloch ran at each other, colliding with an ear-splitting crash. I glanced back, seeing Moloch ripping one of the dragon's heads off its neck with his sharp fingers. The head screamed as blue blood erupted from the stump. After a moment, the neck fell limply forward. The other dragon heads bit Moloch in a unified attack. They ripped deep holes in his shoulder and arms, snapping over and over like rabid dogs. As the two eldritch monstrosities attacked each other in a fierce battle, I lost sight of them, but the sounds of fighting echoed over the entire island, crashing like lightning. I felt like the survivor of an apocalypse. I couldn't find a single other living person on the island. Hundreds of crushed, broken, and decapitated bodies surrounded me. Over the cacophony of fighting, I heard a new noise, the whirring of a helicopter nearby. It was coming from the other side of the mansion. Frantically, I sprinted towards the other side, seeing a Black Hawk helicopter getting ready to land. A man in black robes sat in the pilot's seat, his green eyes gleaming as a wide smile spread across his face. I smashed my fist into the door over and over until he opened it. "Holy shit, you're still alive?" he asked. I hadn't seen this man before. He had a face like a Calvin Klein model, all sharp angles and high cheekbones, perfectly proportioned in every way. But his scalp looked melted and scarred, as if someone had thrown gasoline on his hair and ignited it. His eyes were stunted, twisted growths of scar tissue. His hands, too, were covered in deep, folding burn scars. Are you the Savior?" I responded quickly. "Please get me out of here." "They call me that," he said wistfully. "The Savior, yes, I guess I am. Get in." The Savior stared at me with his strange green eyes, the color of swamps where monstrous things swam under the surface. "Some people just need to learn the hard way," he said. The helicopter took off into the dark night, covered with bright twinkling stars. "There is no great power without great responsibility, after all. Those of us who seek the Ancient Ones know it comes with a cost." I just stared out the window, gazing down at the countless mutilated bodies that littered the beach. Below us, the face of the bull stared up with eyes of fiery cyclones. The broken, still body of Leviathan lay at its feet. As we made it over the great waters of the Pacific Ocean, the bull god raised its hand and waved. At that moment, I thought I could almost see a hurricane of translucent souls circling around him, spiraling up into the sky. I'd been watching Trailer Park Boys when my roommate Alex suddenly barged in through the front door, stumbling over himself as his neck craned to look behind him. I almost dropped my plate of oven-roasted chicken tenders, the Friday meal of kings. "Jesus, Alex, what the hell?" I yelled at him as I turned the TV off. I was pissed that he'd ruined my sublime couch potato meditation, something I'd been cultivating for the past couple of hours. He mumbled expletives, more to himself than to me, as he kicked the door shut, getting up from the floor. Now I was concerned. Alex wasn't the type of person that feared anything. I'd seen him throw hands with guys twice his size, and when the situation called for a fight or flight, he almost always fought. Dumb? Maybe. But scared? Never. "Alex, you okay, buddy?" I asked him, placing my tendies down on the coffee table, trying to figure out if it was a get the baseball bat or call the cops type of situation. He turned around and zoomed past me towards the kitchen. He grabbed a chair and dragged it to the front door as he jammed it up under the doorknob. "Who'd you piss off this time?" I asked. "Shh!" he snapped as he gave me a concerned look. "Turn the lights off," he whispered in a ragged breath. I walked to the switch, making sure not to make any loud noises, and flicked it. The apartment became completely dark. "Are you going to tell me what the Shh!" he snapped again, his eyes now turning towards the door. He stood in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, his shoulders dropped down, and he walked to the couch and sat down, letting out a low sigh as his tense body started to release itself from the adrenaline armor. I joined him, but I didn't say anything. It was on him to explain whatever was going on. Once he'd calmed down a few more breaths worth, he began to explain. "First, if it sees you, don't flinch. It's smart like that. It knows what's prey, and it'll come after you. Or that's what I think, at least." "What are you going on about? Who came after you? Did you pick a fight again?" "What? What? What came after me? Not who." "Okay, so what is coming after you then?" "I don't know. I saw it in the woods, just like sitting there, looking at me. And then I looked back and sure it was some kind of prank or some neighbor kid or something. Then it turned like upside down and I flinched and then it came at me. I ran here as quick as I could." Sitting so close to him on the couch, I could smell the liquor coming off of him, his scent intertwined with the eau de toilette of man sweat and cheap rum. "Are you drunk?" He said loudly, then glanced at the door and brought his voice down again. "I'm not seeing things. This is real, Zach. It's not a joke." Alex was a hothead when he was sober, but booze basically made him a kiln that would melt steel beams. I needed to calm him down, approach the subject slowly, even if it did ruin my night. He was my friend, right? "Okay, I'm sorry," I said, reeling back, distancing my emotions from the subject. "Where were you?" "Just out by the trail, coming back from the bar." "Okay, and what should we do?" "I don't know. At some point, I stopped looking back. It's so fast, like a cheetah or something. It moved. It was like a circus freak or a dancer or something. It didn't move like humans or animals do. I don't even know how I outran it." He'd started to spiral. I'd seen this before. Whenever Alex got some idea in his head that he couldn't wrap his brain around, he couldn't just leave it. Instead, it swirled around in that thick head of his, scrambling up his mind, vignetting the world. Things of that nature would frustrate him to no end, and I still hadn't figured out a surefire technique to get him to reposition his attention, but I was going to try anyway. Well, we got the door secured. I don't hear anything outside, I told him, hoping to calm him down a little bit. You sure you didn't hear anything? I'm sure, man. Okay, yeah, thanks. I need a drink, he said, hopping up from the couch and heading towards the kitchen. After some clattering, he emerged with a frosty bottle of Mexican beer. He turned the lights back on and bent down as he slammed the bottleneck on the edge of the coffee table, sending the metal cap flying across the room in an impressive arc, the work of a seasoned drunk. The bottle reached his lips just before the frothing bubbles began to spill over. He suckled on it like a pacifier, his throat making extraordinary loud gulps as he finished nearly half the beer in one swig. He groaned as he put the bottle down on the coffee table, and burped loudly as he sat down. Just like that, he was back to his old self. "You want to talk about it more?" I asked pensively. "Nah, man, I'm sure it's nothing. Sorry I got you all stressed out. That friggin' thing just looks so weird," he replied, his face as blank as the TV. "Yeah, must have been something really messed up. It's all right," I told him. No point dragging out things. Maybe tomorrow he'd want to talk. "Want to watch TV or something?" Alex didn't say anything. He just stared at the reflection on the black TV screen, his head facing directly forward, his arms limp beside him. "Alex? TV?" I pestered, but there was no reply. I looked towards where his gaze had sank to see if he was staring at something in particular. At first glance, there was nothing at all. Not even a fly buzzed on the wall. But then, movement from somewhere. For a second, all I could process was that something flickered, changed shape in what I was seeing. But I was unable to piece together what it was. Then it clicked. It was on the TV screen, which reflected us sitting on the couch. Alex's head began to twist, like it was a clock. Except, instead of hands, it was his mouth and eyes and nose that shifted around, turning and turning, pulling his skin and flesh as bones cracked and tendons snapped inside his head. Then he stopped, and where his mouth used to be, there were two bloodshot eyes. Where his eyes used to be, there was a mouth, drooling spit and blood. I couldn't see or say whether he was smiling or smirking or frowning or all of the above. Something happens in the brain when things are upside down, making it harder to process the details. One thing was for sure, though. It was looking at me. I was completely frozen. I could barely feel my legs, and my throat became as dry as a desert. All I wanted to do at that moment was finish off Alex's beer. But I didn't scream or run or throw punches. I just stared at it through the reflection, and it stared at me. After an eternity, the upside-down Alex got up from the couch and limped in front of the TV, blocking it with his body. Its eyes locked on me. And then it started to dance. But not like a real dance, more like an awkward jig. It limped left and right, jumped up and down, its face jiggling as the skin tried to contain its mangled contents. I didn't budge. Alex told me not to flinch. That's all I could think about, and the thought kept me occupied, producing a mental barrier between me and whatever that wretched thing was. After a while, as a sort of last hurrah, I guess, the thing stopped its cursed jig, bent down, and put its face just a few inches away from mine, forcefully breaking my trance. I had to look at it, although it no longer looked at me in a natural sense, because its eyes were closed. Its mouth, it opened its mouth, revealing two eyeballs, still attached to that fleshy cord or something inside. They were held in place by gums, void of teeth, as small puddles of blood filled up the holes where they used to be. The pupils darted around erratically, still functional until they settled their gaze on my eyes. I swear I could see Alex in there, more scared than he had ever been. I felt bad for him. My buddy, my roommate, my friggin' friend, turning him into this thing. Then, gums locked down, squeezed the eyeballs into oblongs, until they finally popped like water balloons, spewing thick chunks all over my face. The urge to move was unbearable, and my own eyes burned as the liquid ooze fell over them. A moment later, the thing opened its mouth again. A muscular, fleshy globule began to slowly emerge from that mouth. It was round and wound in fibrous tendons, and from all its sides produced Alex's yellowed teeth, pointed in all directions, indented directly into the flesh. The fleshy blob was so large that the serrated, unkempt teeth scratched and pierced the edges of the mouth as it squeezed itself out, cutting open the lips until gravity finally took hold and it fell to the ground, making a clunky splatter as it collided with the hardwood floor. The thing's face was much smaller without it, anemic in tone. The thing leaned closer and opened one of its eyes. Out of it came the displaced tongue, still dirty and yellow from the rum Alex had drank. It inched closer and closer, until finally it started to lick the eyeball spew off my face. The tongue was warm and slippery, and it twisted around my eyes and my mouth as it licked off every last bit of eyeball left on my face. From somewhere inside the head, where the vocal cords are, I could hear pleasured groans, low and stuffy as they vibrated in between flesh and bone. When the thing finally backed away, I could feel a sticky film begin to coat my face as the spit began to dry. It tickled and irritated my skin, bothering me unimaginably hard. I needed to do something. I'd been stationary for too long, and all the nerves in my body were beginning to fight back with the stillness within. The thing faced me, its tongue sticking out limply from the limp eye socket. I don't know if it could still see me, as it no longer had eyes. I didn't dare flinch, but time was running out. A cramp, a twitch, a punch. Something was going to happen soon. Something needed to break the incubating stagnation. Promptly, the thing turned around and limped its way towards the window. Slowly and awkwardly, like it was losing control of the muscles and nerves within it. It opened it and jumped out. Our apartment's on the 8th floor, so it took a considerable amount of free fall until I heard a wet thud. Even though it was gone, it took me a while until I felt safe enough to move again. When the cops and paramedics came, I tried to explain what had happened. I thought it must be at least somewhat believable. I mean, his face was proof. The way he looked, nothing natural could do that. They just blamed it on the fall, twisted my story to seem like he'd gotten into a drunken psychosis, his state of mind exclusively messed up, and jumped out the window head first, the impact smashing his face to look like that. They brushed off my story completely, condescending to me, saying that I was making a mockery of Alex's death, that I was probably high or drunk or both. But I know that's not what happened. But that's all I really know, and it's not enough for much else. I can't fight this. I can't reason with it. And Alex is gone forever. I'm grateful for being alive, but I'm more scared than ever. I mean, the thing must have died with Alex, right? But what's been chewing at the back of my mind ever since is the fact that I never found that flesh tooth globule that the thing vomited out. The paramedics and the cops said that they found nothing either, which they mostly used as evidence to disprove my story. Things have been tough since Mom passed. Dad's a complete shell of himself, and I've been left on my own to sort through the abundance of emotions I've been going through. It was actually a relief when Dad told me he was going to head to the cabin for a week. "Can you watch the place for me, Jared?" he asked. Yeah, I had to watch the house, but that was no big deal. It's a 2-story with an AC, stocked fridge, big screen, and a hot tub. It's not like it's a struggle, although the place does still have the landline for some reason. Before he left, Dad told me reception would be spotty at the cabin, per usual. If I really needed anything, I should call between 9 and 11 when he'd be out at the local bar. I told him not to worry about it, and I highly doubted I'd need him. If I couldn't reach him, I'd call Tera next door if I needed anything. Well, it didn't take long before I needed him. I was soaking in the hot tub when the lights on the back porch turned on. The lights back there are motion sensor. Silly me, I forgot to set the security system. What was the code again? As things stood, the alarm wouldn't go off if someone broke in. Thankfully, that animal or whatever it was had triggered the motion sensor, and it reminded me to do it. I'll call Dad and ask him the code. It was getting close to 11, so if I wanted to catch Dad, I needed to call him quick. My finger scrolled through until I found his name in the contacts. I hit call and it began to ring. Suddenly the landline did as well. The landline read Jared's cell. I looked back at my cell. I've dialed Dad home, not Dad's cell. Jeez, silly me. I moved my finger to the red phone icon, but before I could pick it up, the landline stopped ringing. I hadn't hung up yet. Had it gone to voicemail? Confused, I raised my cell to my ear. No voicemail, only silence. Actually, I think I heard something. Is that static or was that breathing? What the hell? My heart was pounding. I immediately hung up the phone. What the heck was going on here? Taking a deep breath, my heart rate began to slow. There was no way I heard breathing. That would be ridiculous. Had to be a phone malfunction or something. I exhaled deeply and then began to laugh. What a way to start off a week alone, right? My cell began to ring. The ring caused my body to flinch. Clearly I was still a little jittery. Who would be calling me at this hour? Looking at the phone, the call was from Dad home. My eyes widened. The phone continued to ring in my hand. In a panic, I hit decline. The backyard was illuminated by light once again. This was all happening so fast. Before I could react to the lights, my phone started ringing. Dad home was calling. Tears began to well in my eyes, and I hit answer. Hello? I asked. There was no verbal response, but there was something. A slow inhale, followed by a slow exhale. My chest tightened. Hello? Hello? I repeated to myself. More breathing in return. Keeping the phone to my ear, I began moving towards the kitchen. Once there, I grabbed a large kitchen knife. I ducked behind the island, and the breathing on the other end ceased. I peeked my head out to survey my surroundings. The open and spacious nature of Dad's home came in handy here. The kitchen was about 15 by 15, with the island directly in the center and at the edge of the house. Peeking around the corner allowed me to see the entirety of the living room. It was a large, wide space directly in front of me. I leaned to the other side of the island to peek in the other direction. There were doors to the theater room, bathroom, and office. Down a little further was a little opening to the left. If you went in there, you'd see the front door and both flights of stairs. The office had 2 ways to get in, one directly visible from the kitchen, and one around the corner in that opening. There were 4 landlines in the house, one in the kitchen, one in the office, one upstairs, and one in the basement. Ruling out the kitchen meant that this person was in one of 3 places. I sat behind the island, my body wouldn't stop shaking. I set down the phone and held the knife in both hands. If someone were here and coming for me, I was going to need more than a knife. I knew Dad kept a gun in the office safe, and I peeked around the corner again. The theater room, the bathroom, and the office door were all slightly creaked open. If I was going to protect myself, I needed to risk it. I inhaled deeply. As soon as I began to exhale, I shot to my feet and tiptoed for the office. Each step creaked slightly, and it was the only sound I could discern. Reaching the door, I wanted to pause for fear of what may be inside. I pointed the knife into the crease with my clammy hands and gently opened the door. The only light in the room came from the opening. Gently, I closed the door behind me and left it cracked slightly open as it was before. Crawling under Dad's desk, I reached for his safe. It wasn't there. Why wasn't it there? Where could it be? Ah, crap. Before he left, Dad had told me he'd moved his safe to the basement. The walkout basement, with a door I'm almost certain I forgot to lock. Also where another one of the landlines was. Then I heard movement. Someone was here. I sat on the knife so the light wouldn't reflect and curled into a ball. Outside the office, I could hear a fair amount of footsteps. Then the sound of a door swinging open. That was the theater room. Moments later, I heard a thud. Another door was flung open, this one closer. The bathroom. That was followed by another thud. That meant the office was next. Do I keep hiding, or do I make a run for it? I decided to run. As the sound neared the door and grew in intensity, I shot through the open door and exited the office, ducking around the corner. The other door to the office opened, then there was silence. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. Seconds passed. Everything was still. Please, 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 slam the door so I can run. Still no sound. I could feel the little beads of sweat run down my forehead. Finally, I heard the other door slam shut, and I used the noise to disguise me running upstairs. Knowing where the intruder was had lessened my apprehension of going downstairs. I maintained quiet feet, but quickly maneuvered down the steps. As I reached the bottom, I saw that the walkout door was wide open. I didn't have time to worry about any of that. Darting towards the back, I found the safe and punched in the code. Wrong code, the safe beeped. I heard movement upstairs. You have to be kidding me. What was the code? I punched it in again. Wrong code. I could hear some sound upstairs. Whoever was up there was being much louder than they had been before. Frantically, I put the code in one more time. If it didn't work, I'd have to make a run for it. The safe door swung open. I grabbed the gun and hid. While hiding, I turned the safety off, then checked to see if it was loaded. Thankfully, it was. The creaking of floorboards could be heard overhead. Each sound grew nearer and nearer to the top of the stairs. I closed my eyes and tried to focus, steadying the gun. I aimed where the intruder would be and put the line of sight on the stairs. The sounds grew increasingly louder. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Even in the dark, I could make out his all-black outfit and ski mask. One arm was raised, and it looked like he was casually massaging his neck. The figure hobbled awkwardly, each step looking more off balance than the last. I waited until they reached the easiest spot for me to aim, and I fired the gun. A brief moment passed, and then the body came tumbling down the remaining stairs. Flicking on the lights, I kept my distance, gun pointed at the intruder. Red stains soaked the area beneath the man's body. Kicking at him a few times, there was no reaction from the limp form. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to flip him over. He was bleeding immensely from the neck. Removing the ski mask, I immediately became confused. The person was a complete stranger to me. Why would they break into my house? What was the purpose of doing this? What was the wound on his neck from? I'd fired the gun at the man, yet the wound wasn't a bullet hole. It looked like a slash. Looking over to the stairs, there was a hole in the wall. Had I missed? Then how did... It was then that the landline began to ring. It said, Jared's cell.